Major support for Oregon Field Guide is provided by William K. Blount Family, Carol and Velma Sailing Foundation,
on rappel. Oh my gosh, it's beautiful. Good morning, everybody.
Let's do it again.
Nicely done.
Oh, yeah.
14 and a half. Yes! That was awesome.
There you go. Up, up.
Tonight on Oregon Field Guide,
Everybody get your camera out.
we meet yet another furry predator returning to the forests of the Northwest.
If there's enough reproduction, that's going to help make that a self-sustaining population.
Then,
Have camera, we'll travel.
we'll take you behind the scenes to show you how fearless Oregon Field Guide photographer Todd Sonfleet gets shots like this.
Right there, Will.
But first,
It's just such a mess.
I know.
downtown Portland is a surprisingly homey habitat for crows. But these falcons are here to make the city a little less welcome.
People would tell you that Oregonians don't like to use umbrellas. But if you're in downtown Portland in winter and it's getting towards sunset, you might want to keep one handy, even if it's not raining.
Crows and many birds aggregate at night during the winter months to roost, just for security and safety and the social connection that that brings. And the fact that they do it in busy urban places, we think, is related to the lights, and it's warmer. If you get in here between the buildings and you're sheltered from the wind, that's what the science tells us. But quite honestly, I'm not sure how they really get any sleep. It's noisy down here.
For anyone who's experienced the mass evening migrations of these birds, the effect is eerie, even beautiful. But add enough of them to the urban landscape, and you've got yourself a sanitation problem.
It's just such a mess.
I know.
Jerry Jenkins and Lene Berg are two of the many folks responsible for keeping the downtown Portland business district people-friendly.
We were trying to address the crow droppings, and in around 2014, the number of crows that began to roost downtown seemed to increase substantially, so much so that it just became impossible to keep up with it. So I began to look for a solution.
Enter the Poopmaster 6000.
That gave us like a clear swath of sidewalk, but still didn't address the crow droppings that covered the fountains and the benches and the bus shelters. So we began to look at what could we do to address the source.
Traditional hazing methods, such as pyrotechnics and loud noises, really wouldn't work in a densely populated urban district. So Jerry had to get creative.
We were looking for something that would be, well, obviously that would be humane, that would be supported by the Audubon, and that would be supported by the community in Portland. So I got on the internet, and what I found is that it's an issue for urban areas nationwide, but nobody had a solution for it. So after more investigation, I had a friend say to me, have you thought about falconry?
Falconry is the art of using trained birds of prey to hunt game. People have been capturing and training wild birds of prey for 4,000 years.
Normally, you'd find Court Clayton and his raptors at a vineyard or berry field, chasing a variety of birds that eat the fruit. But Portland's crow problem posed an interesting challenge.
I had been mentally exploring the idea of using raptors to manage this crow situation for a few years, and then I was contacted by Jerry Jenkins from Portland Mall Management.
Court was interested, but Jerry's idea was just that, an idea. So Jerry reached out to Portland Clean and Safe, a service district funded by businesses to keep the downtown core clean and safe.
We just started talking about this idea of falconry, which to me was really intriguing.
Unwieldy for sure. It's like, it's not.
And I felt like, this would be worth an investment in a pilot project.
With support from Clean and Safe, the pilot was launched in early 2017.
I'm going to try to get him up in that tree where the crows.
I can back you up with the laser.
We identified initially a pretty small 13-block area right in the core where we were having a lot of trouble with the crows. We thought if we could move them out of that area and push them to more appropriate roosting areas, Waterfront Park or some of the other parks, that would be a success.
To be clear, we're not talking about a small problem.
Last year, in the middle of the winter, we counted upwards of about 10,000 crows coming in to roost on one night, so it's substantial.
Likewise, as far as Court, Jerry, and Lene knew, nothing like this had ever been tried in an urban area before.
There were a lot of unknowns going into this. One of the most obvious was how well the hawks would operate at night.
He's talking about Harris hawks, and this one is named Mars.
The 3-year-old Harris hawk.
Harris hawks are a tropical species. They live and nest in the southern U.S. and down into Central America. They have a great temperament, they're very trainable, easy to work with, and they also see relatively well in low light conditions.
That's a plus, since the majority of the area's native raptors are active only during daylight hours.
We also weren't certain how well the crows would respond to hawks. You can't really know this until you test it.
But just a couple weeks into the 13-block pilot project, results were promising.
First off, the hawks were fine with all of the crazy things that are happening in downtown. They just do their job, they get up in the trees and follow us around, and they work great. And we also discovered that the crows respond consistently and reliably to the presence of our hawks. They retreat. It's really that simple.
And perhaps surprisingly, the hawks, which can be trained to follow laser pointers, don't have to do much to get a rise out of the crows.
The crows are here at night because they are in search of a safe and calm place to sleep. And the presence of one, let alone 4 or 5 predators flying around them while they're settling down to sleep is disturbing to them. Harris hawks are not particularly well suited to killing crows, but crows just can't afford, from a biological or an evolutionary standpoint, to take the chance. So their reaction is to disperse.
We walk around downtown, and wherever there's crows, we fly them. And so he flies for about a couple hours straight.
But do you fly it like once a week, every week?
I fly 6 days a week.
Oh, wow.
Well, generally, I think the reaction has been very positive. Some people don't notice at all. It's just Portland, somebody's walking around with a Harris hawk. And then other people are like, wow, that's really fascinating. Would you tell us about it?
We were contracted by the businesses down here to keep the crows from roosting in the central area of downtown. People do notice them. There's lots of pictures and lots of questions pretty often. It's about a third of the job down here is kind of being ambassadors for the whole project. But most people are pretty into it and excited to know that we're using nature in a way to help, correct problems within nature that man has created, essentially.
So far, I think it's been a big thumbs up. We're seeing them move out of the areas that were most problematic. And really that downtown stays more clean.
With the success of the project last year, it made sense to expand it considerably. So this year we're focusing on 63 blocks, and we have 4 falconers out here doing this full time.
When we first started, the crows were big numbers and hard to push around. As we have been down here several nights a week for the past 2.5 months, the numbers have dramatically dropped. Tonight we saw very few crows and even had a hard time finding crows to fly at.
It's a novel solution, and yes, it's very Portland. But will it solve the problem long term?
Crows are incredibly intelligent, and part of the reason they're so intelligent is because they're highly social. And so they learn from one another. We're hoping that by teaching this group of crows that this is not a particularly safe place, they will teach other crows to find safer, more sustainable places to spend the night.
We're here in the middle of the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest, and these biologists behind me are pretty excited because they've come across sign of fisher, an animal that not a lot of people know about and that hasn't been seen here since the mid-1900s. We teamed up with EarthFix reporter Ken Christensen for what's looking like an amazing conservation success story.
Olympia ground, good morning. Partnavia 357 pump members at Mike Hangers with Charlie, southeastbound.
Runway 17, clear for takeoff.
Do you want to head for 49 issue, sir?
Yeah, let's head to Mount St. Helens here in the blast zone.
Jeff Lewis has spent his career tracking all kinds of animals. But today's search is special.
This is one we've been looking for a long time.
Animals that haven't been seen in these mountains for 70 years. At least, not until recently, when Lewis started bringing them back.
Who hasn't done one? Okay, can you stay right there too and watch that animal come out? Everybody get your camera out.
Okay, here we go.
It's about the size of an otter. It lives in the forest. It's a furry carnivore. They're a beautiful, charismatic, mid-sized, somewhat chunky weasel.
Known as the fisher.
When you say fisher, and everybody goes, kingfisher? Or are you talking about somebody with a fishing rod, or what are you talking about?
The fishers Lewis is talking about are rarely seen by most people. Now he's part of a group of scientists who want to make them a more common sight across western Washington, like they were in the 1800s. Back then, fishers ranged from Northern California to British Columbia, but so did fur trappers. By the mid-1900s, Washington state was down to its last few animals, while BC had fishers to spare. Lewis helped bring fishers from Canada to the Olympic Peninsula first, in 2008.
We ended up getting 90 that we released in there over 3 years, and that's looking really positive.
In 2015, success in the Olympics opened the door to a new release program in the South Cascade Mountain Range. But it's not as simple as releasing animals into the woods.
We're putting them to the test. How do they deal with this, boy, I just landed on Mars kind of scenario?
So they equipped them with tracking devices and followed them.
We want to confirm, especially early on in a reintroduction, that females are having babies. If there's enough reproduction, that's going to help make that a self-sustaining population.
So if you look real close, you see her run into the trees right there? I'm joking.
By combining basic radio technology and long hours in a plane, listening to static, eventually...
There we go. I heard something.
And you hear a beep, beep, beep. Oh, yeah.
Wow, you're getting a boomer now. Guess what? That's 88. Son of a gun.
She crossed back across the road.
Woohoo! Nice. Okay, hit me.
11:10.
We can circle right around it and then hit a mark on our GPS and get a very precise location for that animal at that time.
Then, Lewis joins a team of other scientists and takes his search to the ground.
When we get up on top and listen again, and I'm betting we're going to get her off to the west.
Their goal is to track the animals to more precise locations and set up motion-censored cameras. It's one of the few ways to document whether the population is growing.
We're closer than ever. We had an indication that one of our females was denning, and we went out, set up cameras for a 2-week period. So we're about 80 yards from the potential den site that we are looking for. Lily's den, hopefully.
She's super close this way. Hey, guys, I got her super close right there over there. So she's not far away. She's still moving a little bit.
The search continues until...
Right here. I just heard her. We might be able to track her back to a tree.
We'll go in and try to find a specific tree to focus on and set up cameras aimed at that potential den tree.
They look for telltale signs, like scratch marks on the bark, fur snagged on branches, and other clues.
They love taking poops on logs.
Wow, lots of hair in this one. Somebody definitely spent a lot of time in this tree.
At the top of the tree, there's another positive sign. A cavity big enough for a female fisher and her young, but small enough to keep out predators.
We tracked her right to this area. I didn't see her go in and out of it. It could be a den site, but it could be a rest site. It could just be a nice hole in a tree. But since we're here, it's worth checking out. That's a good spot as any.
We put some cameras that are facing the tree to see if she is coming in and out, and we also put some cameras that are facing outside to see if she's just in the general area, hoping to get some clues.
Weeks later, they begin sifting through hundreds of photos, and most of them aren't much to look at.
Maybe it's a fisher, maybe it's a raccoon. It's a black-brown blob.
They get shots of moving branches, squirrels, elk, and even a bobcat. But eventually, they find what they've been searching months for.
Yeah, that's the one. She's coming down head first, and in her mouth she's got a really sizable kit.
That's a lot of kit to handle for that mama.
For most people, it may look like another brown blob. But for these scientists, it's the first bit of hard evidence showing that fishers could survive here, long term.
We're seeing good survival among the ones we released. Now we've also got the documentation of reproduction. Doesn't mean that it's ultimately successful, but it's a step in the direction that you really want.
And for the Pacific Northwest, a step backward, to a wilder time in its history.
What does it take to find and then climb Oregon's tallest tree? And what does it take to capture that on video? Well, Oregon Field Guide's story, The Search for Oregon's Tallest Tree, aired in a previous season, and it's still available online. But tonight, we wanted to take you behind the scenes and peel back the curtain to show you what it took for our crew to pull that story off.
It's going to get better here in about 2 minutes.
In 2011, Oregon Field Guide profiled filmmaker John Waller as he made a film about the loss of Oregon's white oak called Treeverse. That's when producer Jewel Gilfillan met Brian French and Will Kumjian.
They're arborists, but they're also guys that just love to climb trees, and so they've kind of made it their mission to go out and climb all the superlative trees in Oregon, the tallest, the oldest, the biggest.
That's the one. At 327 feet, Oregon's Brummett fir is the tallest Douglas fir in the world. Unfortunately, the top of this champion tree has died. So in the summer of 2007, the Field Guide crew headed to the southern Oregon Coast Range with Brian and Will to search for a new champion.
When I started thinking about shooting this story, I went to Todd first because Todd really likes to climb things.
It's just fun. I've loved doing it ever since I was a kid. I grew up in rural Clackamas County, and we just spent our days when we were kids climbing these big trees.
In his nearly 30 years on Oregon Field Guide, Todd has climbed transmission towers, wind turbines, tram pillars, and just about all of our tall bridges.
Yeah, I was up on the Interstate Bridge. We went up on the girders underneath the Fremont Bridge chasing falcons. That was fun. I've been up on top of the Megler Bridge in Astoria, up on the big towers up there. Yeah, if it's high, I want to do it.
So to do this story, he's going to need to climb a really tall tree in order to kind of be on the same level as Brian and Will are across the way.
The only way to film a story about tree climbers is to get up in the tree with them. So have camera, we'll travel. The tree I was climbing was just gigantic. and I was leaning out over the canyon. The problem with that is if your rope swings out around the other side of the tree, you start hanging out in midair.
Grab on the top side of the press stick, now gently start pulling down. You don't have to.
So I'm watching him work with Benjamin Trapanese, who is his rigger, get all the apparatus on and get prepared to climb this tree. And I'm shaking, honestly.
Use your hands up above. Boom, just like that. There we go, 2 little steps.
The hardware is gripping the rope. This allows you just to sort of step your way up the tree, just like you're climbing a ladder, basically. The rope kept on wanting to swing me out around the other side where I didn't want to be. So I needed to keep as much grip on the tree as I could with my fingers and my feet. But the problem was you don't want to grab on too hard because you start peeling off the bark. That first 100 feet or so, there's nothing below you, nothing but air down to the ground, and it's a little nerve-wracking at that point. But when I'm working as a photographer, my mind is just sort of in a different mode, and I don't really make space to be scared.
I'm down below at the foot of the tree, and I'm watching Todd go up, and you can hear me off camera just going, oh, I don't know. I'm just a little bit freaking out. Okay, I'm a lot freaking out, but he finally gets about 100 feet up where the first limb of the tree is.
I do remember getting to the first limb, and it was big, big and thick.
And I see him kind of get to the limb, and then he like, I will not panic.
It was not fun to be just dangling out there on a rope. I did not enjoy that part. But it feels a lot more secure once you get up into the branches, and it sort of feels like you're being protected by them. Okay, here I am at the top of the tree, finally made it. And a little help from my friend Ben here.
Yeah, buddy.
All right. Once I got up in the top of the tree, I needed to get in a position to actually film from. I was able to finally figure out a couple branches I could actually stand on to get a perspective on Brian and Will across the way. There's something about being in the top of one of these big fir trees. It's just sort of a different world. The branches look different, mosses look different, and we had a good view out over the valley down below us. That was a place that not very many people get to be, and it's just a really cool perspective.
So that comes to 306 feet and 8 inches. Not bad for a Douglas fir. Not bad at all.
This time, Brian and Will didn't find a champion, but this tree is still growing, and so are its neighbors.
This is not the only really tall tree in this grove by any stretch. We're just, we're gonna have to come back. Yeah, for sure.
Once I end up wrapping up what I needed to shoot, I had to descend. Brian and Will just screamed down the rope, and Ben had warned me that the rope could heat up as you descend. The hardware can kind of make the rope get hot. And he sort of freaked me out a little bit about that, so that made me slow down a lot more. I didn't want the rope to start cooking.
It's been hair-raising watching them up there. But at a certain point, you do kind of relax with it and just enjoy the spectacle of what these guys can do. And I'm so relieved when his feet touch the ground.
I'm home.
You made it. Nice work.
There is a certain amount of danger being up on this rope. So once your feet hit the ground, it's kind of breathe a sigh of relief and say, well, what's next?
He's, Mr. Cool Cucumber. And I said to him, I'm like, Todd, do you do this because you have to and it's your job, or do you do it because you like to? And he says,
it's what I do. I love it. Another day at the office.
A final note to this story. A few months after the shoot, Todd was cleaning the gutters at his house and fell 15 feet off a ladder onto concrete. We're happy to report that after some surgery, 20 screws, 3 titanium plates, and a little bit of rest, Todd is ready for his 30th season with Oregon Field Guide. You can now find many Oregon Field Guide stories and episodes online. And to be part of the conversation about the outdoors and environment here in the Northwest, join us on Facebook.
Major support for Oregon Field Guide is provided by William K. Blount Family, Carol and Velma Sailing Foundation. Additional support provided by Coit Family Foundation, Kay Kitagawa and Andy Johnson Laird, Christine and David Vernier, and the following, and the contributing members of OPB and viewers like you. Thank you.